down.
All right. We shall begin in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Fragments of Silicon, now rejoining the Tuesday continuum. Um, Galix just showed up.
Sorry, I was doing something quick and it took longer than I thought.
Yeah, we still have a schedule to keep because
I know.
You know.
Toot toot.
So, yeah. Anyway, welcome to the Fragments of Silicon European interviews. It's been a while. I think it's been about a month or so since we had one of these cancellations in E3. You know, what can you do? Anyway, we're back, and this week we have. Forgive me if I mispronounce your name. When it comes to foreign names, it's always a bit tricky. But we have Valdemar Schultz Andreasen of Throughline Games.
Close enough. Thank you so much for having me.
Indeed. Right, so we like to start the proceedings by asking, what got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
Okay, yeah. So my father is a programmer. He got educated in the end 70s in Denmark. So throughout the 80s, he did a lot of things. He plugged some of the first internet plugs into Denmark, which was really cool. And so he always just had games coming home. A fun story from when I was an infant and I was just born is that my mother came home with me to a house where Qbert was playing on a computer, and everyone in the family was almost more interested in looking at my brother playing Qbert than little me. So games were always a part of my life and very natural, and my father would bring new games all the time. One of my first biggest experiences was playing King's Quest IV and indeed most of the Sierra games back in the 80s. And I just remember like roaming around in those lands and worlds and getting lost there, and my imagination just flying off. And this led me down just trying a lot of games in my childhood, trying very many different consoles. In Europe, or at least in Denmark, the Sega consoles were actually more among my friends, at least, than Nintendo. So it was mainly Sega, and then as I grew older, then suddenly came the PlayStation, and yeah, the Christmas of '97, my parents got me Final Fantasy VII, and which, as for many, was a very big experience. The one where it was the first time that I played it so much that I was dreaming about this game, and I was dreaming about the world and chocobos. And then I also have a diverse interest in arts and theater and music, and so in my more adult youth, I was trying a lot of things out, working on theater productions, some television. Then I started studying dramaturgy, which is the study of storytelling, mostly for the scene, but for the stage, but it can be for anything. And then just in between, studying and thinking about what I wanted to do, I suddenly found out that I wanted to try to marry these two worlds that are very precious to me. And from there on, I took a master's degree in digital design, where I made a tiny small indie game that got up on Terry Kavanagh's free indie games blog. And yeah, then I did some other stuff, and then I got the job at Throughline Games for being a lead game designer.
So, I suppose my next question is, what was it like making like your own personal indie game versus working at Throughline?
Funnily enough, creatively, not that much of a difference. Obviously, when making something on your own, you have absolute control and you do everything. So every flaw in there is yours, but also every part and hint of meaning is yours. And the team, we are around 15 people when it's high production intensity. So of course there it's a much more like at the same time fragmented but also connected work where the road to getting an idea and seeing it come to fruition can be sometimes a bit more cumbersome, but then other times it can really bounce off ideas. And on this project on Forgotten Anne, we had one art director making all of the art that is not moving characters. So I had a very close work relationship with Anas, who made that. Yeah, I just remember sometimes I would say, okay, I can imagine Anne being in this cave and looking like that or that. And then on his Cintiq, he would just be drawing it almost as I was explaining it. And almost as soon as I was done talking, he would say, so something kind of like this. And I could just sit back and say, yeah, that's totally it. So it's a very rewarding experience when you have creative freedom. We were so lucky to get it both from Square Enix Collective. They have shown absolutely no limitation to what we could do, and also Alfred, our creative director and CEO of Throughline Games, is very open for us to bring the culture that we come with, like the things that have made us. Let's just put as much that we can into the game.
And were you on this project from the beginning, or did you come at a later point?
I came at a later point. This project is let's say the child of Alfred, and he in 2014 he resigned from his position in another video game company to essentially follow his dreams and go all in on making something that would be meaningful for him to do, where he would use his talents. He's a educated animation film director from the Danish Film School, so he wanted to use also his creative ambitions. So he got together with Michael, who's our lead programmer, and they founded the company. And together with lead writer Morten Brunbjerg, Alfred and Morten started developing the story from a story about a much younger girl than Anne, through various iterations into the game and the story that we see today. So I came in, this was in 2014 that started, and I came in when proper production started, January 2016.
Like, all right, so given that the framework was already in place, what ideas could you bring to the table with the game in production?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It was the situation of kind of being handled like, okay, so this is the setting, this is what Anne can. She has her Arca, this device on her hand that can take life energy from Forgotlings and give it back maybe. And through iterations, we found out what would that be. We also, it was also chosen that she had her wings. So we knew kind of the mechanics, but not exactly how we should be using them. At that stage, it could have also turned into a game with proper enemies and maybe even killing of enemies. And I guess for me, I felt that what I sensed this project wanted to do was this sort of cinematic adventure, as it has become, where the most typical tropes of video games maybe take the backseat a bit in comparison, then give focus to the presence of telling Anne's story. That was a very cool thing about having everything placed down, because we had the plot of the story. It has virtually not changed what the plot was from the beginning of the production. So we could really lean on that. It was just that having plot points meant that we had to fill out what happened between the plot points. So very quickly, the production process was this: we literally just started from the top, went through the game level by level, devising how the layout of the levels should be, how they should look. Most of us have worked with film or education in film, so we were always thinking a lot about how to scope out the scene, how to make the camera and place the character so that so everything can be on the same scene and on the same screen. And then just taking it level by level through the story, also devising what happens between the plot points as we went on. And then once we got everything like this black and white version of the game, and back then it was also a black and white Anne with some animations and some missing. Once we had everything done, then we actually went through the game one more time, where we corrected, adjusted, and as we were going through that, we also, of course, colored all of the scenery, because then we could lock down the scenery, and Anders could go from these sketches that are actually possible to access in our, not to plug it too much, but we have this collector's edition of Forgotten Anne that you can buy on Steam, where you can actually roam around in the alpha version of the game. So then we went through the game once more and really did change things along the way, and did correct things in the story as well as in the puzzles. So that was the iterative process that we ended with.
Right. So what was the determination of using the art style here? As I assume this is hand drawn, all of it?
Yes. Yeah, it is. The characters are animated with sprite sheets, the traditional kind of hand animation process. Although most of the Forgotlings, the objects that Anne speaks to, they are made with more modern tweening. But even some of them sometimes have some sprite sheets to them. So a fun thing is, for example, Anne's character, just her character has over 5,000 frames of animation. So yeah, it took all the time of the production to make even Anne's animation.
I can believe it. She's got some very detailed animations.
Oh, thank you.
I'm not used to video game characters being this fluidly animated.
Wow, thank you so much.
It's also this process must have been very painstaking.
Yes.
Because we've known other devs who've done hand-drawn works of various sorts, and that took up that led to years and years of production, sometimes nearly a decade. And so my question is, what could you do to mitigate the time factors in creating such elaborate art?
It all comes down to the I know this sounds so cliched, but it is true. It's absolutely incredible artists we have, and also given the scope of the artist we have. So we had Anders, who did everything static, everything that's not moving characters, one guy doing all of that. Then we had, for the main characters, we had actually a Swedish couple, Debbie and Sebastian, who have been educated in Japan. And I forget the name of I think it's Tokyo Film School or something like that, where they even got some classes from the director of the Ghibli film The Cat Returns. But they were only those two for the main characters in the story. And then for all of the Forgotlings, I think there are over 100 Forgotlings in the game. It's also just one guy, Alexander Kramrov. So it really is quite amazing to think that these 4 people have made all of the visual art in the game in a matter of, let's say, 2.5 years. It is absolutely astounding, and the dedication. I think throughout the production there was this sense of I think all of us knew where we wanted to go with this, and we knew how high that bar was set. So I think everyone really just strived to overachieve. But it was really a team effort where we were constantly amazing each other and almost looking forward to showing the new stuff that we've been working on. But it was quite an achievement.
No doubt, no doubt. Like, I'm still stunned that a game of this quality was done by a team of 15.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
No problem, no problem. Like, anyway, so, in terms of the story, what can you tell us about what's going on here without venturing into spoilers?
Well, it's a story about what you don't know, right? It's the story about essentially trying to go back to somewhere that you are not anymore, and not knowing what that means really, and also the positions that you take up in the world. How, for example, a Forgotling, when they come down to the Forgotten Lands, I guess maybe as an introduction to the game, I'll just quickly tell that the story takes place in the Forgotten Lands, which is where all the forgotten objects, like the sock under your bed or the clock that you can't find, everything ends up there. And for some reason, two humans are trapped down there as well. It has never happened before. So when a lost object comes down to the Forgotten Lands, they become sentient, and they suddenly have a mind of their own. And between the Forgotlings, there's also this kind of debate of shouldn't we go home to our masters, to the ones that owned us? But then there's also some that say, like, no, we shouldn't be owned. We now got a new life down here, and we should see what that freedom gives us. And so that's kind of the debate between the Forgotlings. But most of them are willing to join in on the thought that if we can come home, then let's do it. Let's get back there and get back to where we came from. And that's of course fueled by Anne and Master Bunku, who have set up this ether bridge to get everyone home to the human world. Anne is a young woman who has the role of the enforcer to keep kind of order in the lands, in the Forgotten Lands, to make sure that this ether bridge project can happen. And so she's when a bomb blows up in the beginning of the game, she is to investigate what happened and why this is. And then as she comes further into this case, she suddenly starts to understand this debate between the Forgotlings.
Right. And what can you tell us about, I guess for lack of a better term, the morality system?
Yes. We try to stay somewhat neutral about the situations Anne enters, because I feel that sometimes it's gotten much better, but I just remember like playing sometimes, although I love Mass Effect 1 and 2, sometimes it's very apparent that the only like fruitful thing to do is to be good, because that will only help everybody. And if you're bad, then you can joke with yourself it was bad and see the funny thing, but it can really only ever help you to be good. So we were kind of trying to exercise a kind of like, well, if we don't start out from a point of what's good and what's bad, then it's a bit more fun to place Anne in situations where it is more obscure. And given that she's the upholder of the law, she also has something to stick to. So these situations of trust become more of this, like, okay, there's two different people telling me something that's the opposite of each other, and who do I trust? So the morality there lies a bit more hidden between the seams. Of course, there is. We do have our view on the choices that we make, but in the end, we try to just leave it up to the player that if you did this, then there will be consequences, and if you did that, it'll be otherwise. Yeah.
And are there multiple endings based off this system?
Yes, there are multiple flavors. Everything ends up in something that most people will see, but there are multiple endings. Yes.
I'm guessing it's more than, say, 2.
It's not. let's say that then. There are 2 endings, but there are various flavors for getting to that ending.
I see. And let me see. So you mentioned that at one point this game was going to have combats. What would that have looked like?
It never had like true combat, but it was a thing with that there could have been enemies, and then you were kind of sneaking a bit, Metal Gear Solid maybe, where you hide behind a box or something like that, and then wait for the enemy to pass by, and then get over there, and then if you get hit, then you can distill them. So back then, Anne's Arca had unlimited, let's say, anima to drain. So the combat would be, draining for Godlings, let's say. And that would, to elaborate a bit more on why we went away from it, it is the thing of, if you're able to distill everyone in the game, first of all, part of the reason for telling a story begins to disappear. So we made it, the solution we found out is that Anne will be able to distill a Forgodling if she feels the situation calls for it, or if she feels threatened, because then we can control when Anne is able to it. And that's also why you cannot go on a killing spree. Because that would make it into this more experiment of storytelling, where like that we would lose the meaning of what we're trying to tell. And then on the other hand, it is sometimes it's just very weird to play a character that really kills a lot of people and then starts to having some morality questions along the way. So we try to balance it out a bit, at least. Okay.
So shifting to the other side of the equation, how did you come up with the puzzles and platforming sequences in Forgotten
Anne? Yes, again, we the main design focus was, what is it like to be Anne? What is her experience as she experiences the story that revolves around her? Like it is through her we see everything. Once we get control of Anne, we both know exactly as much as Anne does. So walking in the shoes of Anne was like constantly a perspective that we had, and that meant that we didn't want these super abstract Mario platforms floating in air with no gravity. And if there was to be platforming, it should be something that comes naturally from the story and or the world, how it's created. So the platforming sequences were we knew when we would have them, and then we would try distinct, not too complex puzzles and not too complex platforming sections, but that still felt somehow rewarding and somehow nested in the world. So you see Anne, for example, over a ledge, leaning out. I really love that animation of her leaning out to do a jump. How can we set that into how can we put that into a cool way where it it doesn't, you don't do it that many times that then at the end you don't care about it. So when you do it, how does it feel? How can we make it feel important to do? So that meant a lot of iteration through just placing it again, like modestly, not too much, but here and there, and then also trying to have it in places where A, it was part of the rhythm, and B, it made sense to have. And I guess, sorry.
Yeah. And in terms of Anne's moving mechanics, did you take any inspiration from the platformers of old?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe, as we have also seen in some reviews, maybe a bit too much. It was the thing of the design focus was to have, the naturalistic focus on the weight of being Anne, also trying to go a bit against Anne as a superhero, more like Anne as a human being. And while athletic, she's also clumsy at times. And we wanted to kind of have that emotion when controlling her, that it's not supposed to be super responsive like a Super Meat Boy or something. Although we really love those types of games, it was just that we felt that when I'm playing Super Meat Boy, I'm so abstracted in my mind. I'm just looking at pixels push at very high frame rate, and my smallest movements with my fingers will have everything to say, and so there I'm a lot in my logic head and my reflex head when I'm doing that, where we wanted to be in, like, is there any way that we can translate, the physicality of being Anne? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Once again, this reminds me of an entire subgenre of platformers called the cinematic platformer.
Yeah.
Prince of Persia, Oddworld, Flashback, all of those.
Absolutely.
Like, and the design philosophy is exactly the same. Going back to like the original Prince of Persia, or if you want, Karateka, where people move like people because the games were rotoscopes. So jumping was a lot more kludgy than, say, Super Mario Brothers. People moved clumsily, and that was all part of the gameplay. And I see it's mostly reflected here, although they didn't have the super wing jump.
Yeah. Also those old games. So we went back through and played some Another World and some Flashback, and most often it's also tile based, so that one walking animation fits with the next tile on the tile map when you create the game. And the thing that we did try to like pull it a bit more towards the Mario was that. Hello. Am I there?
I can hear you. I think Adam might be having
you're
problems.
Still here. I think Adam's having problems.
Okay. Everything good? Should I just continue?
Adam, are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just continue talking.
Yes, please.
So we went back through and looked at the tile-based way, and we thought that one way that we could try to add a new version of this was that with normal Unity collision, that there is no tiles. It's more up to the placement of the objects in the world. So trying to at least drag it a bit away from Another World and Flashback, in the sense that those feel even more like it. You can almost literally see each animation getting played on each button press, and we tried to at least have it a bit more fluid than that.
Was that a difficult task?
Yes, it was. Also because, again, we were very ambitious and minute. So for stuff like when Anne is walking downstairs or upstairs, every step that she walks fits perfectly with the drawn stair step, which nobody does. Everybody just kind of has an animation that gets colluded by some piece of art, but actually every stair step for us is a stair step. And when
the science of inverse kinematics is kind of less of a thing in 2D.
Yes, exactly. And to almost a headache for Michael, our lead programmer, who for truly the whole part of the production was sitting with these damn stairs, and always something new was happening. Also because she can jump from the stairs and she can land onto the stairs, and when she takes the ladder up, she's also placing her precise hand. So it juggling that with the animations that came from our animation department, and then also trying to have it somewhat like a fun controller. That was some of the task. And for another fun story regarding control, the wing jump used to be a more traditional double jump. But again, we tried to look for the story in what's actually going on. If you had that kind of thing, how would you ready it? And we found out this kind of you almost load the gun, and then on your next press you get that wing jump. So you're holding down the button because you're keeping the gun loaded somehow, and then pressing it. So we felt that it was a fun extra story to tell through that, which of course is also part of the experimentation that may throw some people off.
Right. So was there anything that was too ambitious for your desires? Like anything that you had to cut out or not implement in terms of like platforming or animations?
The crazy thing about having all of the plot points and wanting to stay true to them was that at one point we figured that we had to have them. So we actually did try to say, okay, let's go into cutting mode. And while there was definitely some things that were cut, it was never the plot points, but it was like, alternative versions of, and I can say this, it's also in the collector's edition. Again, you can go through the old levels, some of the cut material. At one point, Anne is like down in the lower streets in these back alleys, and it was a gigantic level first, and you had various chase sequences and a lot of stuff happening, this labyrinth, and we just realized that it was too big as a set piece, and it didn't give us enough of what was good. So we made it to what's there today, and I'm really happy about it because it's much more clean in that sense. And then some of the things we found space for, the characters that were chasing her got remodeled, rebranded into this mirror section, this mirror dispute that you find when you enter the streets. So yeah, there were things cut, and it definitely also some puzzles. When Anne is chasing someone, there was actually a working puzzle there. It was just that at that point in the production, making the art for that scene literally would be at the sacrifice of making the art for some of the later parts of the game. So of course that would also have to be cut. So yeah, definitely things were cut, but amazingly nothing truly in the story was cut.
Oh, that is rare. Right, so getting down to the engine work, you mentioned this game was made in Unity, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Was there a particular reason you chose that engine?
No, I don't think so. I think it's the go-to engine right now, and of course also maybe there's a bit of Danish pride in that it was initially made in Denmark, and it is very used in the Danish game industry, but it's not singularly used. I know some people use the Cry engine, some people use the Unreal engine, so it is very different. But most, at least new companies, I most often hear them use Unity.
Yeah, that Unity is probably the most used engine we've we've got people, but we've encountered people who certainly do Unreal, and and it's gotten a lot easier. I'm like working with Unity, like because we've known people who worked with Unity like years and years ago, and they would tell us the horror stories of working, especially the 2D stuff.
Sure.
Like,
yes.
Because you mentioned how like the initial thing was called Unity 3D, like it was made for 3D.
Exactly. Yeah.
But now it's become a real powerhouse of the 2D scene. And on that note, how does the game run on the consoles?
Oh, performance-wise, or how do you think?
Yeah, performance, resolution, what have you.
I think we ended with capping it at 30 FPS on the consoles, whereas on PC you're able to play it up to 60 FPS, because we are loading a lot of assets, and we're constantly keeping 3 levels loaded. So Anne is able to, go back into the levels she just came from, or continue forward. So there is a lot of level loading happening up and down. And then just because it's very big textures, I'm veering into parts that I might not know totally, but as far as I know, it's like very high resolution. I don't know if it's exactly 4K textures, but it's very high resolution textures. And so the game, as far as I know, it's in 1080 on all consoles. And the same for PC.
Makes sense. And I suppose that comes to the next question: would this game work on the Nintendo Switch?
We're definitely looking into it. We're trying to see how would this game fit on the device, and that's we're thinking about it and looking into it, and we'll see. We'll if and when we have some news, that will arrive.
Makes sense. Like it's a, depending on the game, it can be a tricky proposition because, like with some indie games, it's no matter. Something like this that's very high fidelity might be an issue on the device.
It is a device that was made, with very good but still mobile architecture.
Right.
So that it is of course there are some new hoops to jump through, let's say.
Indeed. And on the computer side, is this game available for Windows only, or is it also Mac and Linux?
We are looking into a Mac version, and hopefully it won't be too much time before we have news about that. Linux will probably not happen.
I'm like, not too surprising. Like Linux is Linux.
Yeah. I would have loved to bring it because my father has always been using Linux all through my childhood. So just for that sake, that would have been fun to do. But it's right as it is right now. We don't intend to it, but you never know. I'll never say never.
Point taken. It's just if there is usually a version that doesn't happen, it's like the Linux version because
yes, yeah.
There are like approximately 100,000 iterations of Linux.
Yes, exactly. Distributions, yeah.
So shifting gears a bit, what can you tell us about the music of Forgotten Anne?
Yeah, so we have the first cooperation in Denmark between a symphonic orchestra and a games company. We got funding from the Danish government to make this happen, and we have had a composer by the name of Peter Due to kind of be our almost in-house composer, and he's been along from before even I was there, part of the production, he has been part of the he's been getting the story told as it was realized from Alfred, and actually the kind of the main theme is from a very early stage in the pre-production even. So it's very fun to see that even the music has been carried along throughout this ride, and yeah, he has been a big part of the process and has heard of the story and really gone deep into making themes that fit the different characters and the situations, and having a big connection to Alfred, who they spoke at least on Skype very often. And yeah, he's also just such a lovely guy and very excited for games too. He finds it very interesting a field, so he was also interested in making these kind of dynamic musical situations where the music, will be reacting in one way or the other depending on what you do. So that was a lot of fun to speak to him about. And then it's just, what can I say? I love the soundtrack. I feel that we have gotten something that reminds me of some of the soundtracks that I loved when I was growing up.
Indeed. Right. And how many tracks were produced for the game in total?
Oh, let's see. Is it between 30 and 40, I think? And then I think it's 10 to 15 of them. Maybe it's more. I can't remember the exact number, but that around that number is then recorded by the symphony orchestra.
And is the soundtrack available for purchase?
Yeah, it should be available on all digital platforms that it's possible to do. iTunes, Spotify, Tidal. I think it should be readily available.
And shifting a bit, how did you get hooked up with the Square Enix collective?
Yeah, so Alfred and Michael and Morten started doing their pre-production work and started showing off the game, a prototype they got made at various places. And then they showed it to Phil Elliott in Malmö for a Nordic Game Conference. And then I think the story goes something like, then he was a bit excited for it, and then something Alfred and Michael and two other people, they got invited to Canada, to Montreal, in this incubation labs, incubation place to for 3 months they worked intensely on making a more proper prototype, but also getting guidance in throughout, like, things to think about in the industry. And it was somewhere along that process that Square Enix Collective, like, properly got their eyes on it, and we signed a deal with them.
And what resources did the collective provide to you?
They support us both monetarily, but also with PR. They are doing as much as they can to get the game out there, making all the arrangements with the different platforms and such, and also they helped with testers QA, which was unbelievable. I mean, that's for a startup company with ambitions as high as ours. It was just so amazing to have an external company come in and kind of take the helm on the Q&A, and then we could on our end then be fixing bugs, and then these extremely hardworking people were just playing the game over and over and over again for such a long time. And I felt kind of bad for placing them in those situations, because as with any game, there is just so many bugs to swat. And that was really amazing. And they've been super supportive as well, and they have a big understanding for what we were trying to do. And it's just been awesome.
Oh, that's good to hear. Always good to hear. And I suppose big question is, how has the game been doing since it got released?
Yeah, well, outside of Square Enix Collective, we don't have a marketing budget ourselves, so it is this process of spreading the word, and fortunately, we've been getting like really good reviews, and we know from messages from players that write to us that we created something that's worth experiencing. So essentially, we find that like the people who play it really likes it, and then from there it's the matter of spread it more out, spread the word, and we see also reviews keep on hitting, getting in, so that's very nice. And then we just continue to get as many people to look at the game as possible.
Well, hopefully it does does well.
Yeah, thanks.
It's a tough time for indies.
Yes.
Let's see. Well, I think I'm good on my questions. I'll see if my colleagues have any last remarks to offer unto you.
Yeah.
I don't really have anything. Like, I think Adam went through everything I was thinking about, so I'm good.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, our colleague Galax had to depart, because he has work. He has the day job to go to. So
yes, also important.
Yeah. Right. So, yeah, I think we're good.
All right.
Yeah. So the game is Forgotten Anne. It's available on PC, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. You can get it in two flavors. There's the standard edition at $19.99, and there's the collector's edition, which is actually 7% off. You get it for $27.88. Right. So, that'll do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. Be sure to join us tomorrow for our main show as we welcome back Stephen Kick from Night Dive Studios. I'm looking forward to it, and so should you. Until then, I wish you good gaming.